this is going to give you a little information as to why and what is happening and the support you've given us and the aid and the assistance that you've given us. It means so much to us, and we can't thank you enough. We can't show enough gratitude for what you've done and what other brethren have done around the area and throughout the country, for that matter. We have received an abundance, overwhelming abundance of help in various ways, and we're so grateful for that. And we're thankful that you've given us a roof over our heads to keep us warm, a nice, comfortable house, and we just have so much to be thankful for. Brother Tim is operating the overhead, the PowerPoint, and I have this set up with animation, Tim, so you're probably going to be working out up there, clicking the button, because each point is going to have to be advanced. But anyway, we'll get through this, and I hope that you'll, if you can enjoy disaster, that you'll enjoy the presentation. But you know, we sometimes are faced with difficult questions. People say, well, if God is a loving God, and if God is compassionate and merciful, why does God allow suffering? Why is there suffering in the world? Some people use the same argument with regard to evil. Why is there evil in the world if God is a good God? Why is there evil in the world? Well, as it pertains to suffering, we have to understand, number one, that God didn't want man to suffer. God made man in the Garden of Eden and gave him every blessing that you could possibly want to enjoy. But because man sinned, then the consequences of that were pain and suffering. And we continue to have the consequences of sin because every man sins. And James says in James chapter 2 that we shouldn't say when we're tempted that we're tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. God is not soliciting evil. God does not bring suffering upon us. But, of course, as a result of sin in the world, and there are these things that we have to deal with. And we are mortal beings. And so it's a part of the natural course of things. God established nature, and there are natural laws that bring about disasters like tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes and floods and things of that nature. I could spend the whole hour talking about why there's suffering in the world. But think about just a few real quick points. Suffering, though none of us want to experience it, helps build character. It makes us better, stronger, more capable individuals. And the Bible teaches us that we ought to be thankful when we have to endure suffering because it makes us more patient. We learn patience and we gain strength through suffering. There's good that can come then as an outcome. And I can attest to this firsthand. It makes us reevaluate life and death. It makes us consider what's really important in life is not things and possessions and materialism. More to life. And of course, we as Christians look forward to eternal life. So as Jesus said, we don't concentrate and we don't become anxious over things of a material nature. We put the kingdom of God first. And God adds to us the things that we need to sustain us. Matthew 6:33. So then let's talk about this disaster as it relates to me and my family and what you've done for us. And there are countless hundreds and thousands of people in our area that have suffered because of this disaster. We mustn't blame God. And in fact, we need to thank God that we have survived as well as we have. And I am very, very grateful and thankful and humbled by your love and your compassion and your mercy and your willingness to help in whatever way you have been able to. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Tim, if you'll advance that frame just a minute. right there is the house that we lived in for about 6 years over on Oak Shadow Lane, just outside of Benton toward Oak Level. And we were very happy there. We were very comfortable there. We had a good neighborhood. There were people that we had grown to love and appreciate who watched out for each other. And God blessed us with a very nice place to live. But again, it's just a home. It's just a house. The home is really the people that live in it. It's just a house. And so I wanted you to see what it looked like and why we were comfortable there. You have homes and you're comfortable in yours. We're comfortable in ours. But again, you know, things can be taken from us. And that's what happened with us. All right, Tim? This is a slide showing some of the inside of the house before the storm. We'd done quite a bit of work in the house over the 6 years that we lived there. And by the way, I didn't build this house. I built the one next door to it. We like this neighborhood so much, we built a house there in 2005, and we lived there for about 7 years and decided we wanted to move to town. Well, we didn't especially like it in town after having been in the country. So we made a mistake, and we sold the house we'd bought in town, and we moved right back out where we were next door. So this house is the one next door to the one I built, but we really liked the neighborhood. So this is a picture of the country kitchen. We'd done quite a bit of work in this house and tried to make it our own, as anyone would do. Next slide. Another slide of the house, and on your, I guess that'd be your right side, that's the living room. It was an open floor plan. It had a country appeal. It had a big stone fireplace with a cathedral or vaulted ceiling. And I want you to pay special attention to that 3-pane window right there on the side of the screen, because we put that window in about 3 years ago. It was a little dark in that room. There wasn't any outside light. So we decided we'd open it up a little bit and put that 3-pane window, but you're going to see what happened to the window here in just a little bit. All right, go ahead. Now this little room is what we call the dog's room. It was a room that was interior in the home. It was attached to the living room and next to the garage, but it didn't have any windows. It was just this one door, and this is where we kept our animals' crates. And this is where we were during the storm. We determined beforehand that if there was ever a storm of any intensity, that we would move into this room, and hopefully that would keep us safe. We didn't have a basement, didn't have a storm shelter. So this is the little room where we were. Next slide. There's me reclining in my recliner, one of my favorite things to do. And on this occasion, I was in my comfortable clothing, and sometimes I'd read a book, or sometimes we'd watch television, or I'd read my Bible. And we'd have company, and again, it was a very comfortable, nice home, and we enjoyed it. Also another picture of the living room and the bedroom. Now, pay attention to the bedroom. Now, that's not the arrangement that we had on the night of the storm, but it gives you an idea. All right, next slide. Which brings us to December the 10th. December the 10th, 2021. We all remember it. Powerful storm moved across our region. And it actually, I think, began in Arkansas and moved across West Tennessee. It resulted in widespread severe weather across these states. And it was a significantly long and large track as far as the storm is concerned. The National Weather Service surveys said that it was an EF4 plus, almost an EF5 tornado. And again, it caused significant damage over a wide area and a very long track. Some estimated that it traveled for some 165 miles on the ground and was as wide as a mile. So we're talking a mega tornado. These are the kinds of tornadoes that you typically see in the western or midwestern plains, coming across Oklahoma and Texas and places like that. We've had some major tornadoes in this area. I think one was in 1964, and then back in 2006 or 7, there was one that came across Hardin in the Lakes area, and people lost their homes and lives. But this was unlike anything we've seen in a not a generation, perhaps 100 years. Large and unusual. All right, next slide. Here's the track of the storm. We all saw it on the weather channels. And this gives us an idea of some of the major areas that it struck. We all know that it hit Mayfield extremely hard. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to go in there and see some of the downtown area, but it's just about wiped out, including the courthouse and a lot of the businesses in the downtown area, along with a lot of homes of people, many of whom had no insurance and no way of rebuilding. It also hit Dresden, Tennessee. And then it came our way and moved up I-69, or what we know as the Purchase Parkway, and then cut across the highway and caught our subdivision and some other homes kind of out in the country. And then it skipped around Benton, except for on the far side of town, and headed up towards Cambridge Shores and beyond. And Cambridge Shores got hit very, very hard. So this is the path that the tornado took, and you can see the area that's affected by it. Next slide. This is actually a picture of the tornado somebody took during a lightning strike. Of course, it was dark. You couldn't see it coming, but the reports had been going on for days. This was going to be a major storm, and the weather reporters were very concerned and very nervous, and they expressed that in the wording that they used as they reported this tornado. Again, this is an incredibly large storm. And on that night, on December the 10th, the weather radios started going off and the warnings started coming. Take cover, take shelter. They called it a catastrophic and violent storm. Catastrophic and violent. Those were the key terms. And at that point, Bonnie said to me, we better get in the room. We better get in the closet. So we got in there with our animals. We hunkered down on the floor. We had blankets and pillows, hopefully in case there was any kind of breakage or damage that might debris flying through the air. And so about 9:35, it got deadly quiet for just a few seconds. The lights flickered on and off, the rain started coming, and I said, here it comes. At which point the lights went out. Brethren and friends, there was a roar. I mean, I've always heard about freight train sounds, but it was something like I've never heard. And I lived across, when I was a young boy over at Mayfield, my granddaddy had a house across from the railroad tracks. I know what a freight train sounds like. The whole house shook and rattled, the glass broke. The wind blew. There was crashing and banging and noises. And I was leaning against the door of this little room we were in, and it was shaking like this. And all I could think to myself, I wasn't thinking about anything except this is it. This is the end. I was expecting at any moment to be sucked out and all of our lives to be gone. I mean, you don't think about it. I actually didn't think a tornado would ever hit us. It always happens to somebody else, doesn't it? And I told Bonnie, what are the odds of this happening to us? But it did. Which teaches us one thing. We have no promise of tomorrow, do we? Life, as James says, life is but a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanisheth away. We don't know what's going to happen to us today or tomorrow or next week. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we'll go into a certain city and we'll stay there a year and we'll buy and sell and get gain. For what is your life? It's but a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanisheth away. So it can and it might happen to you. It may not be a tornado. It may not be a hurricane or an earthquake. It might be a car accident. It might be COVID. It might be something else. But I'll tell you what, and I preached the gospel for 30 years or 35 years, but this came home real close. And it makes you reconsider and rethink everything you ever thought was important. And suddenly things that you thought were important are not important anymore. Next slide. Now this is the morning after the storm. Of course, it happened late in the evening and it was dark. The lights were out. We couldn't really assess the damage. We had a flashlight, but it wasn't until the next morning that we actually saw the extent of the damages to our property and the properties that were around us. I showed you a few moments ago on your left-hand side where the triple window was. That's a picture of the window facing the hole where the window was no longer there. It blew the window out. If you look on the right side where the yellow arrow is, that little arrow points to the door that I was leaning against, where we were. And then the triple window, as you see, is leaning on the top of the piano, so the window blew out across the room in the air and lodged on top of the piano. That's the force of this wind. All of the furniture that was in the living room had been scooted down the hallway, and there was broken glass and pictures and frames and lamps, and all of our possessions were all in the floor and all broken to pieces. You talk about a devastating thing to see. And this is a matter of moments, a matter of seconds. One moment, you're looking at the pictures you saw 5 minutes ago, and then you walk out the door and you see all of this laying in the floor. It's shocking and disturbing. Next slide. You're looking at that side, on the left side, a picture of our bedroom. You saw the picture of the bed. That's our bedroom, underneath that huge oak tree. That oak tree must have been 200 years old. It was at least 3 feet or larger at the base. And it came tumbling down on our bedroom. And if we had been in the bed, we would not be here today. Had it not been for the reporters and the weathermen and others warning us of the storm and warning us to take shelter, we'd be dead today. And that other side of the picture shows our bedroom furniture. It was crushed and demolished. There was hardly a piece left in that room. Next slide. Notice the grandfather clock on the left side. This is a piece of furniture that I bought for Bonnie in 1984. I'd always wanted to build one from a kit. And she got tired of waiting on me, and so one Christmas they had them on sale at the mall in 1984, and this was the year I'd started preaching, 1984. This clock has been everywhere with us where we've ever moved. We've moved 14 times since 1984 into various preachers' houses and private houses, and the clock went with us everywhere. We took precautions to take it safely and to keep it working and running. So here's what happened to our clock. Glass broken out, the weights thrown out, the pendulum bent and broken, the doors broken, laying in the floor. The other side of the screen is a shot taken out of my daughter's bedroom, where the wall used to be. When the triple window blew out and the pressure from the tornado lifted the roof 2 inches and sat it back down, pulled the studs up from the floor, and blew this side, the whole side of the house out, windows and all. And it was laying outside of her bedroom. Her mattress was gone. We don't know where it ended up. It might be in Owensboro somewhere. Next slide. Well, now that's the grandfather clock today. Tommy Nelson agreed to let me bring it over to his shop, the remnants of it, and using his equipment and his saws and clamps, we've glued that thing back together, and it looks pretty good. It actually runs and keeps time, if you can imagine that. But thank you, Tommy, for letting me do that. He's been a great help to me, and I appreciate him so much. Next slide. Here's pictures of the interior damage. That's part of the wall on the right-hand side that blew out. I had just remodeled that laundry room for Bonnie, and she was so proud of it, but it blew the whole wall out of that. The other side shows the roof having been lifted up about 2 inches off of the plates. And it was not just in this one place, it was around the house, everywhere. Next slide. It cracked the sheetrock and the ceiling. So there was a lot of structural damage. Next slide. This is a view up in the attic. And you can see the roof damage there. I mean, it poured in. The rain was just pouring in. And there wasn't any way to put a tarp or anything over it. It just ruined everything. Next slide. There's some pictures again of the cracks in the ceiling, and there's how far it lifted the walls up from the floor. There was a crack in some of the beneath some of the floor's walls that deep. All right, next slide. And this is another view from the outside. That's the picture of the window, the triple window that blew out, and also the side where Tiffany's bedroom is. It just blew that completely out. Next slide. This is during the early stages of demolition, but it shows a lot of the damage that was done. The house was just a total loss. All right, next slide. Another shot of our bedroom after the tree fell on it, and the railings, those are the railings that were around the porch on the backside, the brick porch, and it just totally blew all of those out into the yard and across the ditches, and we had to just go out and try to recover everything that we could after the storm. Next slide. Right after the storm, I'll give you just a little story about the aftermath of the storm. We tried to get out after the storm was over. So we loaded our dogs up in their crates and put them in the back of our vehicle, and we were going to go over to Bonnie's sister's because the rain was pouring in, and we didn't have any electricity, we didn't have any heat, and it was cold, and so we were going to try to get out. Well, we didn't get to the end of our street until the neighbors told us, Dan, you can't get out. The reason we couldn't get out is because there were hundreds of poles down across the road, and the live wires were laying everywhere. And I didn't know how big those wires were until I actually saw them on the ground, but they're pretty good size. You can't get over them in a normal vehicle. Maybe a four-wheel drive truck you can run over them, but there wasn't any way to go anywhere. So we had to back up and go spend the night in one of the rooms. It wasn't damaged too badly, and it was dry enough in there we could spend the night and cover up until we could see to get out the next day. Trees and debris was everywhere. And we learned that we weren't the only house to get hit. There were 6 or 7 houses in our subdivision that were totally gone. And the others were heavily damaged. Trees that once were beautiful were twisted off like a piece of candy. And it looked like somebody had taken a great big saw and just went through there and sawed the tops out of them. Personal belongings of all kinds were scattered everywhere. No utilities. Well, of course, the first thing that everyone was concerned about is electricity. We've got to get the electricity turned back on. And I understand that, because we weren't the only ones that were suffering with no power. Everyone was out of power. So the linemen had to get out and get the lines up and get the poles set. One night alone, they set over 100 telephone posts. Of course, there were companies from all over the nation that came in here and helped with that and getting the power back on. But it also kept you from getting in and out of your property. So when we tried to get out to go get supplies, we were in their way. And when people tried to come in and help us, you couldn't get in and out because the trucks were trying to do their job of getting the power back on. Really, for over a week, it was very difficult getting in and out of our property. And time was of the essence. We needed to get things out. We needed to get things done. We needed to find a place to shelter. Debris was everywhere. Crew lines were everywhere. People were sorting through their personal belongings. And here's the amazing thing. People from not just around here, but everywhere. We had people from Pennsylvania, people from New York, people from Montana, people from Wyoming, people from Ohio and Indiana, and everywhere. Within 24 hours, they were in here trying to help us. We hear all the bad stories about how bad people are and how unfriendly and uncaring people are. I've changed my mind about that to a large extent. I think there are a lot of good people in the world now. And I've seen them at work. Our brethren have been fabulous. Churches of Christ were very well represented. Hardin and Coldwater and Spring Creek and Oak Level and Bryansburg and everyone, all of these congregations. You know, wouldn't it be great if we could all be in unity? You know? I mean, we can't compromise truth in order to have a pseudo-unity, but wouldn't it be grand if we could enjoy one another's fellowship and work together? How much good could we accomplish? Next slide. There were volunteer organizations, not just Churches of Christ, but denominations as well. And you got to give them credit. You know, they were there. They were passing out water. They were bringing in food. They were helping pick up debris. They were moving furniture, loading trucks, doing whatever you asked them to do. And that's grand. It's great. Individuals were bringing food. Churches were bringing food, supplies, picking up debris. People were there with machinery, helping get rid of some of the limbs and the sticks and the trees so that you could get in and out. County road departments were there. The disaster teams and crews were there, moving debris to the edges so that the road crews could pick them up. Government agencies were out there. This was a real nationwide response. Now, we've heard horror stories, and they may have been true in the past, but it seems like we may have learned some lessons from the past, because I'll tell you, in my personal opinion, the relief efforts were fantastic and continue to be fantastic. Next screen. You brethren here at Hardin, I just cannot express to you how much your concern and willingness to help, willingness to let us live in your empty preacher's home. I mean, anything that I've asked, you brethren have been there for us. What can I say? What can we say? I can't say thank you enough. If I live to be 120, there's no way I can ever repay the debt I owe to you people and to all those that are listening on the internet and others across the country. So they've sent us Visa cards. They've sent us financial aid. They've asked us if we needed anything, they'd supply. You have supplied our needs. And it's unbelievable. There are not enough words to express our thanksgiving to you. I can never be able to repay. And I know you don't expect repayment, but it's just the idea. And a lot of these people are strangers. They've never heard of us. They don't know us from Adam. Next slide. I'm using this PowerPoint wherever I can get permission to come, because I want to say thanks. And I want to serve. And I want to encourage people to do good to others when they need it. And you folks here at Hardin are in this PowerPoint because you deserve to be there. people need to know that this congregation is benevolent and caring and helpful. And I intend for them to know it if I have any say in the matter. So thank you again. Next slide. This was demolition day. The house couldn't be repaired. We thought about trying to tear it down and fix it up, but you'd have to have taken it all the way down and then tried to repair it. And by the time you got into it, $200,000 or $300,000, and then the engineer came out and told you, well, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that. There's just no way to repair it with that much damage. I mean, from the front side of the house, it didn't look like it was that bad off, but from the back side and up in the attic and inside, it was terrible. No way to repair it. So we had to have it demolished. And this is part of the demolition. It's hard to stand there on the corner and watch 6 or 7 years of your life just being reduced to rubble. But that's what we did. Next slide, please. There's the pile on the left-hand side. The folks that came and did the demolition said, yeah, we've got a machine that'll take it down. It wasn't a great big excavator either. It was a little skid steer unit with a grapple hook on it, and they'd grab up as high as they could reach and grab a hold of it like that and pull it. Took them all day. And the only thing they couldn't take down was the concrete slabs and the big porch in the back. And the Bread of Life folks contacted me. I think they're going to come out and do that for us. So there's the house we lived in for 6 years, reduced to rubble. But we lived. And we survived without injury. And things can be replaced. Lives can't be replaced. Our hearts go out to others that have suffered worse than we have. There are a lot of people still living in motel rooms or up at the Kentucky Dam Village. And they don't know where they're going to go. God's taking care of us. I'm thankful that I've got good folks and brethren. There was a time in my life that I thought, I don't have any friends. I don't think that anymore. Next slide, please. Well, what about rebuilding? Well, here's the facts. The subdivision over there, 5 years ago, it was affordable. But they required 1,600 square foot. That's the minimum. And you understand why. You got a nice group of houses, and the neighbors want you to build a house that's comparable to theirs, so it doesn't lower their property value. And that helps you, and it helps them. So 1,600 square feet, minimum requirement. Before COVID, you could have built a house in there for what your insurance paid if you had insurance. But today, the contractors are all booked out for 2 solid years. You can't get a contractor to build you a house for 2 years. And if you do get them to build, they're asking anywhere from $190 to $235 or $40 a square foot. So at, let's say, $225 a square foot, which is somewhere in the middle, a 1,600 square foot house would cost us $360,000 to replace, to build it back like we had it. And we can't afford that. I'm 67 years old, and we're on retirement now. I can't afford $360,000 and a 30-year mortgage. The estimated payment for 30 years for a $360,000 loan is $1,657 a month. Can you imagine making that payment on Social Security? It's not feasible. We wouldn't pay it off if we could do it till we're 97 years old, and I hope I live to be 97, but I'm not really counting on it. Next slide. So we found a place to buy. Here's the little house that we bought. It's 2-bedroom, 1 bath. It's been well kept. It's about 30 years old. It's over on Highway 68, but it's a nice little house. And the couple we bought it from is a young couple. They've got a couple of children. He's got a new job in Covington, Kentucky, so they've already gone there and bought another place. And we're going to get possession of this house about March the 23rd. We've got a couple of weeks' worth of work we want to do inside before we start moving our stuff in. But we're thankful. What a blessing. There just isn't any houses available right now, and especially houses that you can afford to buy. We looked everywhere throughout this region, Marshall County, Graves County, Callaway County, Fulton County, Caldwell County, Lyon County, everywhere in western Kentucky. And then we went down into Tennessee, Weakley County, Henry County, Stewart County, Montgomery County. Everything that you look at is at least $250,000 to $275,000, and the ones that you can find in a range that we could afford were built in the 1930s, and they've got old-fashioned appliances, and they've got rotten floors, and the roofs need changing, and they've got old heating and air conditioning systems, and we just can't afford to live, you know. If we spent all of our money buying a place like that and then had to do $50,000 worth of remodel, we just couldn't do it. So we're blessed. Are we ever blessed to have found this house? I found it on the marketplace on Facebook. It came up one night, no realtor. They're selling because he's moving jobs. I contacted him. We made an appointment the next day to see it, and we bought it. So what a blessing. We're thankful. Couldn't have done it if we didn't have a place to stay. We'd still be looking someplace to live. You all have furnished us that. Next slide. So thanks again. Thank you so much. Thanks from the bottom of our hearts. How many ways can I say thank you? You have helped us so greatly, and we're so appreciative for what you've done for us. Next, I think, in final slide, Tim. You know, there's no promise of tomorrow, is there? We don't know what tomorrow will bring, or if there'll even be a tomorrow. The Hebrew writer said in Hebrews 9:27, it's appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. There are no second chances. I preached at a little congregation a couple of weeks ago, and the sermon that I brought was the doctrine of second chance. There is no second chance after death. Once you die, then the final line of the last chapter of the book of your life is forever closed, and there's no changing it. The judgment day is an appointed day, and God only knows when it is. But Paul, you remember in Acts chapter 16 on Mars Hill, said the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because he's appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance, and that he hath raised him from the dead. So there is an appointed day. You don't know when it's going to be. I don't know when it's going to be. And we don't know if we'll be dead or alive when the Lord comes again, but we can know that he will come. It's as sure as he was resurrected from the dead. There's going to be a day of judgment. And you're going to be there, and I'm going to be there. We'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account of the things done in the body according to that we have done, whether it be good or bad. So there's a day of reckoning ahead of us, every single one of us. And we'll be there. So we find the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 2 telling us that now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. On the night of December 10th, when the storms were being predicted, I thought it'll never happen to us. But it did. And had I been laying in a bed 25 feet from where I was, I wouldn't be here standing here talking to you today, and neither would Bonnie. Or if Tiffany had been in her bedroom and the windows blew out and sucked her out that window and carried her away somewhere, she wouldn't be here today. I mean, that's how far away we are from death. A few moments, a second. Are you ready to meet God? Are you ready to stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account? Think about it. This is real life. And if you're not a Christian this morning or this afternoon, you need to obey the gospel. No two ways about it. You don't have tomorrow. You can't do anything about yesterday, but you can do something about your eternal destiny right now. And so as we sing a song of encouragement, if you're not a child of God and you need to obey the gospel, we want you to come right now, making the great confession. I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God for remission of sin. Be baptized into Christ and into his death in order to contact the saving blood. Let God add you to the church that Jesus died for. If you're an erring child of God, you've not prepared to meet him, You've gone back perhaps into the practice of the world, or you've just become complacent. Then it's time to get your life right. Why not do it now while together we stand?